Assalamu alaikum. I'm back again. I've decided to go ahead and record another video, one that I have been thinking about since last Sunday morning. And this is, I wouldn't call it a review of a particular TV show that was on, but just something to think about, something that we all need to think about as people of faith. And I'm not talking just to Muslims in general, but anyone of any faith needs to think about this for their communities and how they can make their communities more accessible, more welcoming to members, especially those who may not have been able to take advantage of all that their faith community has to offer. And what this program was on, it was on a local NBC channel. I don't know if it was a nationwide broadcast or just regional or just local, but it was called A Place for All. And
You've got mail.
And it talked about how religious institutions have been slowly trying to get their facilities accessible to the disabled and incorporating programs or services that could meet the needs of their disabled members or disabled visitors. And it mainly focused on uh, Christian churches, Jewish synagogues, and the several mosques that were featured. And I will not name the specific places because I can't remember them all, but I just want to use an example of what was done and seeing firsthand some of the places that I have been personally. And one of the places that was featured in the show was a synagogue in a larger city, and it was like a two-story building with kind of like a basement. But what they did was they made a lower level access from the outside, a wheelchair accessible access, so a wide door, perhaps a cheat button where the user would just take their hand and bang a button that would cause an automatic door to open, or the door just may have a sensor on it, like a lot of grocery stores and other public buildings tend to have. And what they did was they put an elevator in the building so that the person could go up to not only the main floor of their worship space, but to a stage like platform, a raised platform that in a synagogue they called a bima. I have no idea what that means, but I'll just call it that. And it would allow, for instance, if a kid in a wheelchair was going through bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, depending on if it was a boy or girl, and they would have to read from a Torah. If that kid could not get there otherwise, they might not be able to fully participate, or another arrangement would have to be made. So elevators are one way of accessibility, but they cost money, and they had to do some serious fundraising to pull that off, and they did. And another form of access that many facilities are turning to are ramps. For instance, the church that I used to attend up until the 90s, there was no wheelchair access into the church until the Americans with Disabilities Act came about, and more public facilities had to be reconfigured, reconfigure their entrances so that people in wheelchairs or who use walkers or scooters or other kinds of mobility devices or aids would need to get into a building. And the ramp was constructed in such a way that it blended in with the rest of the architecture of the building. And it allows access for people to go up into the main worship space, and then there is a basement entrance with a wider door so that a person can go into the social hall. But the upper level of that other building is not wheelchair accessible, but that social hall is, and so that was the main focus of that renovation, was to make it more accessible. And in the mosque that I personally attend, we have what is called a stair lift. And what it is, it's a little chair that rides up and down a rail, and there is a button on it. And the person would sit on this and put their feet on a footrest and push the button, and the lift would go up or down. And since we have two sets of stairs, one going up to the prayer room and another one going down to the basement from the lobby entrance, so we have one brother who uses that, and otherwise he would not be able to get up and down the steps without aid, possibly from someone else, if he was having serious difficulty walking that day. And so these lifts actually do not take up a lot of space, and even a big man can sit on it, and it's very efficient. It doesn't, it's only about maybe a couple feet out from the wall, so it takes up little space but does a big job. And other accessibilities do not involve physical structural changes, but actual people doing things to make accessibility possible. For instance, they focused on the Muslim conference, where they had signers stand on the stage and sign all the speeches and the question and answer sessions, so that deaf people attending could understand what was going on. And if you're in a big space, even with the speaker's image up on a big screen, they might not be able to lip read or do not know how to lip read. From a distance, if someone is sitting in the back of the hall, they cannot see the person's mouth move to read what they're trying to say. So a signer who makes bigger motions with the hands and often wears a dark long sleeve shirt or jacket so that the hands are more prominent against a darker background. For instance, I hold my hand in front of my face. It's not as prominent as if I had my hand to the right against a darker background of what's behind me. So that's another thing. And sometimes congregations will, if they, Christian or Jewish congregations might use a word projection where if a song is being sung or a chanted thing, some kind of a religious chant is going on, then the words could be projected up on a big screen so that a deaf person might be able to follow along that way. And that's another form of adaptation. And the program also mentioned about a Christian congregation that wanted to have more involvement of disabled people, so they named a disabled woman as a leader of a women's group. women's ministry. So the program is basically saying, get disabled people involved in your communities, reach out to them, and include them, make them feel welcome, because otherwise you know, they have little or no participation in the public religious life. So that's basically what this program is saying, and I personally agree with that. And I have done that. I have personally led totally blind people, to seats in the pews in the church that I used to attend, or I would make kind of a motion to, when I was a song leader, I would use a large upward motion of my hand to invite the people to stand to sing a particular thing, and so that would also serve as an indication to a deaf person that it was time to stand. And we had at this church that I used to sing in, they had a blind guitarist, and I'm not sure if he still plays there, but he would have to listen for specific clues, since he could not see the music director's hand movements, for conducting signals. So he would have to rely on his ears more, and of course you practice the music often enough, and you do it often enough, you get it in, kind of a sense of it in your head. But when you still have to rely on your leader for some clues. So he would have to rely totally on audible sound signals. But so, for instance, if there is a blind person who comes in, if there is a larger number of blind people in a community, text could be printed in Braille that they could follow along. And in the mosque that I attend, we also have Qurans that have translations in multiple languages, so that people who may not be able to read the Arabic, but are fluent in another language, if, for instance, if they are a Bosnian immigrant or a Malaysian immigrant, then they can read it in that language and understand the meaning of it. So, and that's another way of accessibility to, break down language barriers. So I don't know if this program is available online, but if you go to the NBC website, you might be able to find it, or just Google search the title "A Place for All" and see if that comes up that way. But if it is online, I think it's a good watch. I thoroughly enjoyed having it on. I agree with everything that was said, that disabled people have to be included in the religious life so that they may feel more like a part of the community and not so isolated or alienated. And I focused on this because I worked with disabled people. I have been around disabled people for pretty much all of my life. And being legally blind myself, or as I like to say, illegally blind, that's kind of what I focus on. And when I think about things, for instance, a pothole, I will report a pothole on a city street because it's a hazard not only to drivers but to pedestrians, to people who use mobility devices, or people who are pushing strollers or carts or bicyclists. And if in the winter, which it is now here in the middle of the US and in Europe, I